So first I want to introduce our interviewer. No good interview goes well unless you have a good interviewer. So tonight we have Kai Corral. Did I say it right?
Yes, you said it right.
Okay. She's from Houston, Texas, and currently an undergraduate student in the information science program at UNT. She plans to continue on to her master's in library science and is interested in concentrating in possibly music librarianship or possibly archiving. She joined the College of Information Student Ambassador Program for 2023-2024. And if you don't know about the Student Ambassador Program and you're interested, you can reach out to her, if that's okay, Kai.
Please do. Please reach
Okay.
out if you're interested.
She would like to encourage all people who have dreams to reach for them, regardless of having different abilities. And she's fluent in American Sign Language and heavily involved in the deaf community. And actually, before everyone else got here, I was going to ask you, what the impetus to that is, but perhaps you and Philip can discuss that during the interview. And she likes to spend her free time snuggled up with her cat reading a good book, which is a great thing to be doing tonight during the storm. Are you all having storms as well? Because it's storming here, so.
Yeah, no, for sure. I've been cuddled up with my cat all day.
Excellent. Well, hopefully we won't have any internet problems because of the storm.
I should be good on my end.
Excellent. So everybody, welcome Kai. Kai, welcome to our event.
Yes, thank you. Thank everybody for being here.
Okay. And then let me introduce our guest, the famous librarian, Staff Sergeant Philip Espe of San Diego, California. He joined the President's Own United States Marine Band in May 2022. Staff Sergeant Espe began his musical training on the piano at age 5, clarinet at age 9, and conducting at age 16. In 2007, he graduated from Coronado School of the Arts in Coronado, California, and then attended DePaul University in Chicago. Funny thing, my niece just started working there at DePaul, where he graduated. Yeah, isn't it a small world? Where he graduated in 2011 with a bachelor's of music in clarinet performance. Staff Sergeant Espe also earned an artist diploma in conducting from San Diego State University in 2013 and a master's of music in orchestral conducting from Northwestern University in 2015. And finally, the reason we have him here tonight, a master's of science in library science from the University of North Texas in 2022. That's a lot of education, Philip. So his notable instructors include Wagner Campos and Julie DeRoche of DePaul University, Matthew Rowe of SDSU, and Victor Yamplowski of NU. If you're a musician, you might know those names. I actually do not. Prior to joining the President's Own, Staff Sergeant Espe was a library associate for Youth and Family Services for the DC Public Library and music director of the NIH Community Orchestra in Maryland. From 2015 to 2017, he was also conductor of the DC Youth Orchestra Program, where he managed the El Sistema music education program for the Children's Orchestra, collaborated with the Kennedy Center's Turnaround Arts Program, and artists Esperanza Spalding, Joshua Bell, and Yo-Yo Ma. I think we all know him. And led a tour to Chile. From 2013 to 2015, he was conducting teaching artists for the People's Music School in Chicago. As a Marine Band librarian, Staff Sergeant Espe prepares music for performances by the Marine Band and Marine Chamber Orchestra, serves as the music acquisition specialist, and assists in maintaining the music library and historic archives. The Marine Band is America's oldest continuously active professional musical organization, which I did not know.
220 years.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. That's a long history. I actually learned a lot of history reading your bio. It was founded in 1798. The band has performed for every U.S. president since John Adams. Here's the history part. Known as the President's Own since the days of Thomas Jefferson, the Marine Band's mission is to provide music for the President of the United States and the Commandant of the Marine Corps. So everybody welcome Philip. Philip, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
It's so wonderful to be here with the UNT community. I'm so glad to be here with all of you.
Thank you. Well, we appreciate your presence. I'm going to put my view in speaker mode, and I recommend that all the rest of you do that as well. I'm going to hand it over to Kai and Philip, and they're going to go ahead and start the interview. And if you have questions during the interview, you can drop them in the chat, and we'll pay attention and we'll get to them at the end. All right, take it away, Kai.
Hello. Very happy to be here. Very happy that you are here, Philip. So we talked a little bit before, but I
Mhm.
want to get into the nitty-gritty with you for this interview.
Sure.
The first question that I have actually, we emailed back and forth getting this ready.
Mhm.
And you wrote in an email, and I quote, for better or for worse, my career has been defined by figuring out what I like and didn't like about the work that I was doing. That's how I've gotten from starting undergrad, hoping to win an audition as an orchestral clarinist, to where I am today. Could you please elaborate on the parts that have been for better and enlighten us on how you navigated any of the for worse parts?
Yeah. So I think I have found what I really want to do, the mix of things that I love doing. Um, and it kind of took a circuitous roundabout way to get here, right? So I started undergrad wanting to be a straight clarinetist. So I got my performance degree in clarinet. I realized the thing that I loved most about making music was making music together with people. So I got involved in conducting. When I was conducting, I realized the place that I feel really happy making music with is teaching children. So I started working as a teaching artist and got my first full-time job working with the DC Youth Orchestra program. When I was in education, I found that some of the aspects of nonprofit work didn't mesh with what I wanted to do, was really being in with the community. So I found myself in public libraries. And in public libraries, I found the things that I liked best in that space, right? Doing story times, creating interesting programs, working in our special collections department, doing local history work and working with archival collections and like thinking about the lives of people. When the opportunity to audition for the President's Own came in, I said, why not? I threw my hat in the ring. And won the job miraculously, which now I get to kind of combine so many aspects of my work. So obviously my music knowledge is important on my day-to-day work, understanding the music and getting the music prepared for our musicians and our conductors, but also my training at UNT doing getting my archival science degree made me perfectly set up to help be our archivist. So I also serve as the historian of the band. So I get to do kind of that community history about the people that lived and worked around the band. So it took a while to get where I am. And I think a lot of people find themselves in music in the jobs they want to have, sometimes a lot faster. But I did a lot of discerning about what kind of work I wanted to do and kind of just followed those paths to where I am now.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people that I've spoken to anyways who are like well established in their career and doing what they want to, it's always started with that like why not moment. Like it's kind of just like a sure, why
Yeah,
not? And I've personally had an experience like that, which put me on the path to the College of Information.
good.
So I hear that actually quite a lot. I do want to highlight that sometimes it is, most of the time it is taking a big risk and just finding out what you like and if you hated it or not. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah,
I also worked in public libraries actually for the past 2 years, which is where I found my love for archival and library work.
good.
So we can definitely agree with that. I when I first started working there and had my why not moment, like why not get paid instead of be just a volunteer here. And I got accepted and I fell in love with it and started talking to our local history librarian, and it was just that really put me on my path too. So that's really, really awesome to hear.
Yeah.
And I feel like you don't really know until you try, personally.
It's the number one piece of advice that I have for people going to library school is do the work somehow, whether
Yeah.
it's starting as a volunteer, getting a paraprofessional job. I started as a paraprofessional. I I discovered what about the work that made me excited about it. So good on you. I'm glad to know this before you jump into the MS.
Yes, I was a volunteer at that library, my hometown library, since I was 12. And when I hit 18, well, almost 18, they were like, "We have a summer position. You should apply. We can't guarantee anything, obviously, but you
Right.
should apply." And I was like, "Okay." And so for the past 2 summers, I've been doing that, and it's amazing. I love it. Um, but unfortunately, last year was my last one, so I could really focus on being here, doing what I need to do. But my next question for you was, how did you find out about the position for the Marine Band Ensemble Librarian? And what was like the process of interviewing? Like, what was just the whole process of getting into that?
So our audition gets posted on the Marine Band's website. So every time we have open positions, that's there. It gets announced on our social media. I'm based here in Washington. I do have friends that are in the band, and they said, go for it. I went for it once, I believe in 2019 was the year. I did not win the job. I tried again one more time in 2021 and won the job last year. So if at first you don't succeed, quite honestly, you go for it. Our process at the Marine Band Library is a competitive one. Resume round with a cover letter is the first round of things that we go through. That field gets narrowed in our last couple auditions, goes from about 100 or so applicants, narrowed down to about 20. Each of those applicants gets a phone interview that drops down to about 5 or 6 finalists. And then those finalists have a take-home exam about music preparation and planning processes. And then we bring them in for a full day interview. And that full day interview was like one of the most exhausting, most difficult interviews I've taken in my professional life. So in our case, we follow the format of an ensemble librarian interview. So there's a test about musical knowledge and different practicums from putting together parts that are impossible to play if they were given as printed, figuring out a solution to that, proofing, editing, and just and then an hour and a half long with our leadership team in a formal interview setting. So there's a lot to it. And like I said, we are looking for somebody that brings a lot of things to the table. And that's what our process is as an ensemble librarian job interview process, which is different than many of the kinds of librarianship that happens that you prepare for through a library school program.
Yeah, that's definitely intense. It's a lot more than you would normally get for a librarian position, for sure. Did you have to be recruited into the military for this?
Yes, so I am an active duty member of the United States Marine Corps. So part of getting the job and part of staying in the job is making sure that we are qualified for service as active duty in the military.
Awesome. That's very impressive to be able to do both of those things at once. And including you doing both of those things at once. I know that your title is staff sergeant. So what does that entail on top of like being a librarian?
So we enter the Marine Corps at a grade commensurate with our experience. So in the president's own, that grade is an E6 or a staff sergeant in the Marine Corps. A staff sergeant grade is usually a higher in the top tier of leadership positions, enlisted leadership positions in the Marine Corps. They're called staff non-commissioned officer positions in the Marine Corps, which just is to say that we are held to be examples for lower grade Marines. We are held to high standards of personal appearance and conduct. And really in the president's zone, because we're always right there in the forefront of things. It means executing our jobs at the highest level that one can do for our players, that is playing music at the highest level possible. Our players could be in the major symphony orchestras of our country and around the world, but they play with us at the President's Zone. On our side of things, as part of the support staff, that means having everything ready and it's pristine and just good to go, so people can go out and do things. That kind of attention to detail in my work, making sure the music is pristine and just ready to go without any problems. When my job is done well, our musicians and our conductors see no problems at all with the music. And that's kind of the standard to which I try to do my job on a day-to-day basis.
That's so beautiful and important. I actually played the cello for about 7 years.
Yes.
I was in choir and I played the cello.
Sure.
So I know how music, like what in an orchestra, how everything functions on such like a high level, and it really is like this interconnected web of people. And if someone doesn't do the right thing or doesn't have up to standard, it can totally crumble in like 3 seconds. So it's super admirable that you are able to do that and have such a solid connection with your orchestra and everybody else that you're with, especially as a conductor. That's also a whole nother thing.
That's my work outside.
That's
the
word.
Training that I had. That was
Yeah.
my performance training. So I'm very much a librarian, an archivist, a historian for the band. That's what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis with the Marine Corps.
Yeah, so I mean, I never considered going in professionally. For me, when I played, it was just what I really enjoyed doing as a hobby and a passion. But you wanted to become a professional clarinetist as an undergrad, correct?
Yes.
And do you think that having a music background is like necessary to become a music librarian, or do you feel like that's just a bonus?
I think I really do think it is a necessary background, particularly because when you're working in a reference position, or even me on kind of on the flips, like on the opposite side of librarianship. So it's ensemble librarianship, which is slightly different, right? It's preparing music as opposed to curating and finding resources for folks about music.
Yeah.
In both sides of the work, I find myself needing the people that I am, my customers, right? My stakeholders that I'm working with. They have a lot of music knowledge. So the more knowledge you have of what they are working with, like the literature of music, the more you've played, the more you know about it, I think the better you are at going, oh, this, you want this, or understanding like the questions. Oh, maybe we shouldn't use like the Breitkopf editions of the Mozart's, the Beethoven symphonies, because that means we'll have things that we'll have to work on. Let's use the Barenreier editions because those are the newer critical editions of these things. Having that kind of knowledge of going, yes, Beethoven 6. Yes, we want that version. We're doing this with Augusta Reed Thomas. Cool. Augusta's represented by this people. So I send my request for rental this direction. And on the reference side too, you're looking up something about Puccini. Okay, here are where I go when I need to find out things about 19th century Italian opera, right?
Yeah.
The more you can like immediately jump in to the literature, either the theory, the history, the performance materials, I think the more, the easier time you have with kind of a very vast amount of work, and a customer base that really knows it.
Yeah.
While we're librarians, we want to be generalists. It does help in this very specialized kind of musicianship that you're as close as possible matching the knowledge base of your customer base.
Absolutely. I feel like that's a part of the charm though, too. That's why you go into specializations like that, is you are so passionate about this music and these musicians, and you're able to, I know when I did referencing for the past 2 years, if someone mentioned something that I was very passionate about, I like lit up and I was like, I actually know exactly what you need. I was so excited to jump up and grab people exactly what they needed. So
Sure.
it's good to know that it's absolutely necessary, but I do feel like that's also part of the charm of like going into it, is like that is something I'm passionate about, and that's something you get to just like talk about all day, which is so fun. Speaking of all day, what does like a day in the life of a Marine Band librarian look like for you?
Sure. So um in our office, we work kind of on a rotation basis. So about every 5 to 7 weeks, you're on deck, and you're the subject expert on everything that's happened. So everything that is going to happen. So that's preparing the music for any event that happens that week. Generally, you have a concert to prepare for. So that's making sure all of like cross-checking all the music, making sure all of that is ready to be played, making sure that everyone has good page turns. Like you've played
Yeah.
more, right? And
Yeah.
when you see music that goes from one page to the next without a break for you to turn pages, doesn't that make you frustrated?
It's so frustrating. It's like, I feel like I just got thrown into a different dimension. Like, it's so crazy.
So that's a big part of what I do, is making sure that quite literally relaying out parts occasionally to make sure people can work through the music without any problems. To get to that place, we're doing a lot of database work. So we have a specialized database that we have that keeps track of both our materials in the library, but everything we do and perform. So we're working in the database to make sure all of that's cataloged. We are on my side of things as the historian, as my principal secondary duty in the library. I'm handling all of our requests about the history of the ensemble. Lisa said that we are the oldest continually operating professional music ensemble in the country. We are 225 years old, and the Marine Corps loves knowing about itself. So I get on a near daily basis a question about something the Marine Band has played or done, or what have we done in the past, so we can support that in the future. One of the more like exciting aspects of that are things like tomorrow, actually that's tomorrow the White House is hosting a state dinner for the Prime Minister of Australia. So part of that process is figuring out what we're going to play to welcome the Prime Minister to the White House. What do we do and what do we sound like, so we can be the most welcoming we can be. I was the librarian for the state dinner in honor of the Prime Minister of India a couple months ago. And that involved figuring out everything we had played for past Indian prime ministers at the White House, and figuring out what's culturally appropriate, and helping our directors find and put together music for the ensemble. So there's that music preparation stuff, the history work, and then reference questions. I get a lot of the reference questions, right?
Yeah.
So what did the Marine Band do at this time? And that's work that I do in collaboration with the Marine Corps History Division and also the National Museum of the Marine Corps, and making sure that all of our artifacts are properly taken care of from an archivist's perspective as well. So it's all over the map.
Yeah, no, you are doing it all for sure. A lot to keep up with.
Yeah.
For sure. And you're here gracing us with your presence. I know that today we kind of have you in the spotlight, but always keeping track of what you say, and I will use it against you in an interview. Uh,
Sure.
I was very interested when you said that my work is done best when I'm invisible.
Hmm?
I know you're in the spotlight right now and we kind of are highlighting you, but I'm very interested in like what you meant by that.
Okay. It's the thing that we talked about with like getting a page turn
Yeah.
that like doesn't work, right?
Yeah.
That's me taking care that's me taking care of the music for you,
Yeah.
right? It's making sure that like during rehearsal, when the conductor says, everyone, can we start at rehearsal 4? That rehearsal 4 exists on every single part. So no one goes, I don't have a rehearsal 4. That's a detail that I missed, right?
Yeah.
Mhm. And so when you don't have those issues of going, this doesn't work as a player or as a conductor, um, then I've done a really good job at making sure I've seen all of the issues that you could have had on the way from like telling me you want to perform. Again, I want to perform Beethoven Symphony Number 6.
Yeah. That makes
That's the only
perfect.
information I get. And then I go and I fill in all those blanks to make sure that I have that music prepared for everyone. Um, and so if they don't, um, if no one has any problems in rehearsal and everyone can just focus on playing the best they can, then they're not thinking about, oh, Philip did a really good job on this.
Yeah.
Just doing their job. That means I've done my job.
Yeah.
Invisible.
Yeah. That makes perfect sense. I mean, me and my friend actually, I mean, it's not obviously the same situation, but me and my best friend actually just had this conversation the other day because we're in a class together. And she was like, I'm never getting any feedback on my stuff. And I was like, that means you're fine. I was like, that means you're doing good enough to where no one has to call you out on what you're doing wrong. And that was just kind of like a huge perspective shift for her to be like, oh, I am doing things like where I'm not having to be called out on it. I'm just simply passing by, doing my job correctly, and no one's mad about it. So that makes perfect sense to me that if you're not being recognized, that means you've done your job right. Like you've done it correct to where no one has to be like, who's in charge of this? Because who didn't have it together? So that makes perfect sense to me. Um,
That's not to say that people don't recognize when you do a good job in art.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely.
But it
I
feels like if you don't like there's always that moment of panic
yeah.
where we have a monitor up from our rehearsal space down to our offices in the basement. And so we do have a live feed on what the ensemble's doing. Um, and it is always nerve-wracking when you see everyone stop playing for a while and the conductor's in a score and you can see somebody in the band like yelling something back, talking something back, and you go, oh no, what did I say?
Yeah. So yours is kind of less playing the music and more of like being in the history of it and like, being making sure everything runs smoothly for the
Yeah.
players. So like how does the aspects, I'm trying to think of how to phrase this.
Sure.
How do those aspects of the job fulfill your original passion for performing music versus being the person behind the scenes?
Um, so when I was a performer, you know, and again, I'm a classical musician.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
the work that I do is interpretive art, right? Classical music is an interpretive art in so much that it's not a creative art. There is no creation. You are recreating a piece of art when you
Yeah.
perform. For me, the music itself
Hmm.
is the magic,
Yeah.
right? So when I decided to move my career away from being a pure performer
Mhm.
Performance was the thing, into a place where I am like supporting performers doing their job well.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's still really fulfilling. It's wonderful to, you know, there's it's still wonderful for me to like
Yeah.
work a job, and this is the context.
Yes.
So one of the most magical things that I get to do is we go to the White House with a band to celebrate with our country on any number of issues. But to be in the band, president finished speaking, the band starts playing the Stars and Stripes Forever, John Philip Sousa, and I sit there knowing that like everyone is doing that because I did my job well and they have the music that they need.
Yeah.
To hear the best band in the world play the most famous march in the world that was written by a former direct member of the band. It's humbling. It's still so artistically satisfying to me to
I
know that all of that's around me.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, at the end of the day, you're always a performer. At the end of the day, you're always a performer, regardless of how long it's been since you've performed or where you've performed. At the end of the day, once you're a performer, you're always a performer. It's always there in your heart and your mind. So I think that's really awesome that you're able to kind of take a step back and get behind the scenes and be like, I'm able to support these other performers because I've performed. I think that's a really, really beautiful thing. Um, I know before you had talked a little bit to me about being in like public librarianship.
Yeah.
You were known as the Storytime guy as youth services, which is where I have been in specialty for the past 2 years. I've specifically teen, but I did a lot of youth and worked with children's too. So what made you leave that? Like what did you love about it? And also what made you decide that it was like kind of time to just move on to a next step?
I love children. I love seeing kids be everything, being an adult that shows a child anything is possible. That's the magic of a public library, right? There's something in a library for everyone. And libraries at their best tell people to come in and explore who you're going to be. For me, my favorite way to do that was through story time. Like, I'm obviously a performer. So the performance of books, the performance of song, and like imparting that feeling of welcome through music and literature to even the youngest, but also their caretakers and the adults, and to help them find that joy in the stuff that we did in the library, was so exciting for me. I will say, if I did not win this audition, I would still be in the public library. I would probably have moved from that paraprofessional position into a librarian position in the public libraries. That said, at the Marine Band, there is a real need, not need, but there's a new emphasis on making sure that the Marine Band is the ambassador of American music to the American people. So in that case, we are doing a lot of education and outreach work, especially for young people. And so I've been really lucky to continue my work for young people. Now I get to do it at a national level, which is extraordinary.
Yeah.
I'm working right now on developing our Young People's Concert for next February. So helping put together that program with Major Nowlin, our soon to be commanding officer of the Marine Band. The Marine Band has also been really supportive of my work in the children's librarian space. I was just presenting sponsored by the Washington State Library, workshops across Washington State, 3-hour-long workshops on musicianship and children's librarianship, and how to bring musicianship and diverse music into librarian story times. And that's work that I got to do in uniform as a member of the band, doing outreach to the people that are making children's lives better, knowing that I'd have those opportunities to kind of spread my reach
Yeah.
in different levels was an opportunity that was extremely exciting for me and made me really want to throw the hat in, even if it was a really big detour. Not detours, that says like I didn't want this job. But kind of a refocusing of what I'm doing, right? And I do feel since getting the job that a lot of interesting things have kind of coalesced in this position that I'm really, really excited to do, between the music preparation and everything else that comes together in the job.
Yeah, I'm sorry if you can hear my cat screaming at me. She's upset that I'm not giving her cuddles right now because we were
That
cuddling.
makes sense.
So she's upset now that I've taken a break from her.
Okay.
You had kind of talked about just youth librarianship, and one big props to you for being storytime guy, because every time I did storytime, I was exhausted afterwards. I mean, you're for sure a performer with lots of energy, because storytime would take me out. I love storytime, but I could not do that all day, every day. I give huge props to youth and children's librarians who do that very often, because that was a lot for me personally. And I worked with teens, so I didn't have to do it super often. But
Sure.
I mean, kind of in that different shift of you worked with more children and I worked with more teens, what did like youth librarianship in a public library look like for you on like a day-to-day basis?
I was in communities that I didn't see a lot of teens. So
Okay.
that's one thing. My libraries were in very dense young families.
Okay.
A dense population of young families. So that means I was doing primarily work with babies to toddlers, which prior to working in public libraries, zero experience, right? As somebody that worked music ed, primarily instrumental music ed, the youngest kids I had worked with were in 2nd grade. So working with children younger than 1 year old was a new experience to me.
Absolutely.
But yeah, day to day, it really was like learning to listen to a child, right?
Yeah.
One of the great joys of children's librarianship to me was always, and this was being able to speak to the child about what they wanted.
Yeah.
I love, even at the youngest age, for better or for worse, I love bypassing an adult who's telling me what their kid likes and like crouching down and talking to the 3-year-old and saying, all right, tell me what your favorite book right now is, and let's see if we can find a great one together. Right? Like, those conversations are my favorite conversations.
Yeah, I mean, I did student teaching for like kindergartners through 3rd grade for about 2 years in high school. And I started to realize that it wasn't the teaching that I liked. It was like connecting with children kind of on that level of like, I want to listen to you. I want to hear what you have to say, not your parents' long list. And not to say that parents' long lists aren't helpful ever.
Sure.
It is helpful, but it was nice to connect one-on-one with the kid and be like, what do you want to say to me? So I ended up joining my pals program, which was I
I
did
love pals.
I did pals for a year. And that kind of made me realize like, oh, I really enjoy helping and connecting with the kids rather than teaching. So I can totally like understand and connect with you on that level with like the youth librarianship of being like, I want to talk to you, I want to get on your level. And I feel like a common misconception is also that you have to baby talk children, but like they understand a lot more than people think like they do about what's going on all the time.
Yeah, I've always really ascribed to the like Mr. Rogers approach to talking to the
Yeah.
child. right? That like children have rich emotional lives. They're big feelings because they're often the first time they've ever had any feeling
Yeah.
before. But when you talk to a child with dignity and you
Yeah.
just use different words to explain big concepts that are comprehensible to a child, they love it.
Yeah.
Right? That's a skill that communication is a skill that the adult needs to practice, often with the child, not the child to the adult. I
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah, no, 100%. So, how was it going from working with like babies to toddlers to being in special collections? What did you learn from just kind of shifting over into that world?
Um, my imagination when I started at UNT
Mhm.
was to work in special collections with the ability to do like community archival work and to do some of that outreach to children. Brooklyn Public Library has a wonderful program where they have their archivists do primary source projects with children at public schools, creating connections about their specific place that they live.
So,
And that was a real inspiring thing to me. But in special collections, I really enjoyed working with community collections and working with individual donors, and the papers of individuals, because it was fascinating to me to like look at a person's life, right? It's no different than being in public service with children to me, right? Because I always saw children as full human beings.
yeah.
Adults are also human beings. And in special collections, you just kind of make sense of who a person was through the things they saved,
Yeah.
right? Like things that were important to them um, are kept in their collections that get donated to an institution. I worked on a collection for one of the founders of what became the Washington National Opera, this extraordinary woman. Um, and uh, she had an entire file folder of newspaper clippings of cute animals from the Washington Post.
That's awesome.
And I just think like those, like, for some reason, that was really important to her, and that was in her filing cabinet, and that made it into the public library as part of her archival collection. That the DC library said, yes, we'll take your papers. I just think it's so interesting that humans live these fascinating lives.
Yeah.
And one of the great parts about doing special collections is engaging with their fascinating lives through things.
Yeah.
Um,
One really cool thing that my library did when I worked there was each month we had like glass displays for our history librarian.
sure.
She would have people from the community come and they would donate their items for a month to be on display, and she would get to like take it from them, and they would come and like she wouldn't take it personally, she would just stand there and they got to set up their own belongings and do their own little kind of special collection for the month and like make it the way they wanted to and display it to the whole community, which was just so amazing because I mean those things are incredibly personal to people. So whenever they have an opportunity to curate it the way that they want to and make it display it the way that they want the world to see it and not necessarily how somebody else does, but still having that historical impact is just so important with special collections specifically. um let me
Absolutely. Well said.
oh
I
I see
think we might have time. Yeah, it's me. I think we might have time for one more question. And I don't know, Philip, you kind of already gave the advice to students. If you want to repeat it real quick and then maybe go to question 10, Kai,
okay.
after that. Okay. So repeat what you said about advice for students at the beginning, because we've had some people join us, and then we'll go on. Well, last question, question 10.
Yeah. For me, my career has been about finding the things I love, and going after them. And it's being open to the fact that the thing that you thought you loved maybe a year or two prior may not be the thing anymore. because you've learned more about yourself. So trusting the things that you like, and what you do kind of gets you to the place. One of my clarinet teachers always said, like, pay attention to not what you intellectually want, but what you do on an everyday basis. Part of that advice brought me into conducting, because like, I know I have to play my clarinet, but I really want to sit and study this score. That is telling me something about what I want. So having that ability to say, I've changed and I've learned more about myself, so I'm going to explore something new, is the defining feature of my career. And that advice that I've had from my teacher, to like pay attention to what you do and what you love, I think is the most valuable thing you can do, especially in the discernment process of your career.
Absolutely. That's awesome. And that's great advice for sure. Because I mean, they say you do something you love, you don't work a day in your life. And my last question for you is, what work have you done or that you're currently doing to support the National Museum of the Marine Corps?
Oh, yeah. So at the National Museum, the Marine Band holds its own history collections, right? So things that are primarily two-dimensional are owned by the Marine Band. So those are in our files, in our safes. The National Museum of the Marine Corps technically owns all of our three-dimensional items. So that are things like our Emmy, or our uniform items from the past, or our historical instrument collections, or the many things that we own of John Philip Sousa. One of my favorite things is his very small boots, because that man had very small feet. We own a pair of John Philip Sousa's boots. And his fezzes, because he was a Shriner. He has 4 fezzes. I love the fezzes. So our work with the National Museum of the Marine Corps means that we are the custodians of the objects that they own. And so we work with them to make sure those items are taken care of well. We have a special assistant from the museum who does a lot of the cataloging of those items and accessioning of those items on behalf of the museum, as part of the process that a curator takes items into the museum. So that is our relationship with NMMC, that all of the stuff having to do with the band does get to live with us, which means I get to use those things to help tell people the story of the band.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah,
really
that is really awesome. And by the way, Olivia must have visited the museum, because in the chat she writes, that museum is awesome. So
It's an extraordinary space. It's an absolutely beautiful space. I was a librarian at our last concert at the Marine Corps Museum, National Museum of the Marine Corps. And it's a joy to visit that space.
I didn't even know. So I will, next time I'm in DC. I used to walk around DC when I was younger, and my dad worked at the Pentagon.
Sure.
But it's been
Yeah,
quite
you have
a
to
while.
drop all the way down to Quantico, which is a little difficult, but the museum's wonderful. A great place, a really wonderful place.
We do have a few other questions in the chat. Julie wanted to know, what's one of your favorite collections or items in your archive? You mentioned the fezzes, but is there something else?
So there are 2 items that I think are really extraordinary in our collection. Number 1, we have a poster from the Marine Band's tour of the Soviet Union in 1990. We were the only military band from the United States that toured the Soviet Union. And we have this enormous hand-lettered poster from, I believe, I won't say where it was from, but the story is one of our colonels was talking with his Russian counterpart, and the Russian counterpart said, "That poster on the wall, that's for you. That's of you." And he says, "Oh, that's wonderful." And the Russian counterpart said, "Would you like the poster?" And he says, "Great, would love the poster." And so the Russian counterpart had someone pull the poster down, so we're like missing a corner of it, it up and handed it to our colonel. And so now it lives with us. So I just think that's like one incredible story of soft diplomacy and the way like music can kind of connect people at even a very difficult time in history. That happened on that tour, and a physical representation of that lives in the library. But my favorite thing is John Philip Sousa's manuscript for Semper Fidelis, his march that he dedicated to the Marine Corps. That every time I pull it out to show people, it kind of gives me chills. It is the item that I can show to any Marine, and they immediately understand how important and how wonderful our work is at the Marine Band when I show them Semper Fi, the national march of the official march of the United States Marine Corps.
Okay, wow, that's fascinating. Julie's writing, and I agree. And then Lance has a question. Lance asks, do you ever find the need to create personalized charts through Finale or Sibelius? I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing this. Okay.
Yeah.
Or is all your sheet music taken care of through licensing?
So there's a lot there. In the library, we do handle the licensing and copyright for the organization. So we're the ones that are making sure that everything works. The Marine Band has a staff arranger. So that staff arranger puts together new charts and gives that to us, and then we prepare the music. Like, for example, tomorrow night, he has a bunch of new charts that he's written in honor of Australia, right? And all of those are custom made arrangements that we then produce at the Marine Band. Otherwise, but yes, to do all of those things involves licensing. For example, we are going through a licensing process to do a concert that I'm the librarian for at the National Cathedral for Veterans Day. So we worked to get arrangement licenses for things like Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy by the Andrews Sisters, or the theme from MASH, as we were preparing this concert to celebrate veterans. So kind of both, but a lot of the things that do get arranged for us get arranged by our in-house arranger. And I see a question.
Yeah, so I was actually going to ask you if you maybe want to read Lance's next question, because I'm afraid I'm going to butcher the names of all those things that are in there.
I don't know that piece, Lance. And that said, I adore Granger's work, and I'm surprised that I don't know about that piece. So I will have to look that up to see if we've done it. Because in general, I don't even know it. So thanks for bringing up a new Granger and Ravel piece. They're like my two of my favorite composers all in one. Thank you for that recommendation.
Yeah, I think that's something that brings people together, is love of music, right? I mean, love of anything that you're passionate about, but music really seems to bring people together, and that's one of those things. So I've completed the questions in the chat, but if you have a question that you didn't get answered, feel free to put it in the chat now, or you can also, if you want to unmic and ask it out, you can just ask right in the Zoom. Yes, Philip is here for another 4 minutes. I did question. Oh, Kai, did you have a question?
No, I just said don't be shy.
Okay, yeah, I'm not shy. So why did you choose UNT's program? There's other library science programs. You were in the DC area. Okay, so go ahead and tell us.
Yeah, I was working full time, and I did end up attending UNT during the pandemic. So I felt like both a program that was taught asynchronously was important to me. I knew of UNT's reputation for training librarians, because there are UNT trained librarians kind of I've met all over the country. So I felt like, and also a program that had experience doing distance learning. And of those choices, the UNT met those expectations, but also was at a price point that felt comfortable to me, because library school can be really expensive, and I've done a lot of degrees. So adding a third graduate level degree, I thought was important for what I wanted to do with my career, but I didn't really feel comfortable going too far
I
down
understand.
that path. And UNT checked all of those boxes. And particularly the archives cycle is so well taught, and the readings are so well curated. I'm really, really glad that I was able to engage with those ideas at UNT.
Thank you so much for that nice little advertisement for UNT. And then I see Julie has a question. Julie, your hand's up. You want to go ahead and unmic and ask your question?
Yeah.
Hi, Philip. Thank you for talking with us tonight.
Yes.
I'm curious, have you had the chance in your role to work with other music libraries or archives? And what would that collaboration look like if you have?
So when so our sister organizations, we do a lot of work together, in so much that we share music very freely. We share music as we have them, and to help out the other organizations. So the other bands in the area, the U.S. Air Force Band, the Pershing's own Army Band, and the U.S. Navy Band, we kind of work together to make sure that we're all taken care of. Furthermore, the Marine Band is a member organization of the Major Orchestra Librarians Association, also known as MOLA. MOLA is the professional organization that connects ensemble librarians around the world. And so we kind of know folks all over the world. And when we need help about a piece of music, we have that resource of a network of people around the world that are doing our job, which is finding music and preparing music for professional ensembles. So the support network is really strong, probably because there aren't an enormous amount of people in our profession, right? The number of people that are professionally preparing music for professional ensembles and collegiate ensembles isn't super big. So we try to stay really connected in the field.
Excellent. And Julie says, thank you. That's so cool. The library profession really does have a niche for everyone. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we're at the top of the hour. It's 8 o'clock. I just want to say thank you so much, Philip, for joining us tonight. It's been a real pleasure. I think everyone here can agree to that. And Kai, thank you for a wonderful interview. You really brought a lot to the table with all your additional information that we could learn from. And thank you to all the attendees who joined.